With everything that made her strange was actually making her powerful. Not powerful in the loud, obvious way the world tends to reward. Not the kind that walks into a room and needs that room to confirm it. Something quieter, older, the kind of powerful that doesn't ask for permission and doesn't even want it. She was the girl who sat a little too still at parties, who listened more than she spoke. And when she finally did speak, something in the room went quiet without anyone knowing why. She didn't chase people. She didn't perform. She didn't shrink herself to make others feel bigger. But she didn't throw herself at the spotlight either. People didn't know what to do with her. So they did what people always do with things they don't understand. They gave it a name. Weird. Too serious. Too intense. Too selective. Too inside her own head. She believed it for a while. Most of them do. But here's what the whispers never told her. Neuroscience has been quietly building a case for who she is. Brain research, behavioral psychology, decades of data on how certain minds process the world at a depth most people never reach. And the verdict is in. They called her weird for years. Neuroscience has a different word for her now. Sigma. She was never broken. She was never behind. She was never the problem. The world just didn't have the vocabulary for her yet. Stick with me, because what comes next might be the first time you've ever heard your own story told back to you. The girl who never fit the grid. Every social structure ever invented assumes one thing: that people want to belong to it, that the hierarchy is attractive, that the ladder matters, that fitting in somewhere, somehow, on some rung, is the goal. She never got that memo. Not because she was above it. Not because she thought she was better than everyone climbing and competing and angling for position. It simply didn't register as something worth her time. While everyone else was learning the game, she was standing slightly outside it, watching the whole thing with her head tilted, genuinely puzzled by why any of it mattered so much. This is one of the defining traits that separates the Sigma female from every other archetype. Not superiority, but indifference. A bone-deep, completely authentic indifference to social ranking that isn't a pose and isn't a defense mechanism. It's just how her wiring runs. And because most people can't imagine genuinely not caring about status, because social positioning is so deeply baked into human psychology, they assume something must be wrong with her, that she's faking it, that she's hiding something, that the distance is a wound dressed up as a choice. It isn't. She just never needed the grid. And that, right there, is what makes her genuinely unclassifiable by every system that was never built with her in mind. Her brain is running a different program. Here's where the science stops being abstract and starts being personal. Neuroscientists who study introversion, high sensitivity, and deep cognitive processing have found something most people never get told. Certain brains are wired for depth over breadth. More internal processing. More time spent turning a thought over before it becomes a response. More activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region behind long-range thinking, self-awareness, and pattern recognition. This isn't a disadvantage dressed up in scientific language. It's a different cognitive architecture, and it comes with a cost most people never see: speed. Social fluency. The ease of moving through situations that ask for quick, surface-level engagement. Her brain doesn't do surface level well because it isn't built for it. Every piece of information gets routed deeper, held longer, turned over more carefully. What looks like zoning out from the outside is actually a 6-lane mental highway running at full capacity. Dr. Elaine Aron's research on highly sensitive people, a category with enormous overlap with the Sigma profile, found that these minds don't just feel more, they notice more. Their sensory and emotional systems pick up information most brains quietly discard as irrelevant. The half-second flicker of a micro-expression, the shift in tone nobody else registered, the pattern in a situation that won't become obvious to everyone else for another 3 months. And there's a second piece of wiring underneath all of it, something that explains why she was never tempted by the things that motivate everyone else. Her reward system simply isn't tuned to status. Climbing, performing, being liked, being chosen, none of it lights up the same circuitry that lights up in most people. What fires for her instead is meaning. A real problem. A question worth chasing. Autonomy. The hit she gets from solving something true is the same hit other people get from being noticed. That's not coldness. That's not a missing piece. It's a different wiring diagram entirely, one that was never going to reward her for playing a game she never signed up for. She's not in her head because she's overthinking. She's in her head because that's where the real work happens, and the work is always running. The pattern her mind keeps finding. Watch her work on a problem for long enough, and you'll see something most people never get to witness. Connections appearing where, as far as anyone else can tell, there was nothing to connect. This isn't a personality quirk. It's how her brain organizes information in the first place. Most minds compartmentalize. Math stays over here, art stays over there, work stays separate from everything that isn't work. Hers doesn't build those walls. A detail from one conversation will quietly link itself to something she read 6 months ago, which links to a pattern she noticed somewhere else entirely, until, without warning, the pieces resolve into an answer nobody else in the room saw coming. Researchers studying this kind of cognition point to something specific: stronger connectivity between the brain's associative, imaginative networks and its focused analytical ones. In plainer terms, the dreaming part of her mind and the doing part of her mind are never fully off from each other. They're in constant conversation, which is exactly why she can be the most pragmatic person in the room and the most original one, often in the same sentence. It's also why she tends to be useful in ways that are hard to put a job title on. She's the one who notices the inefficiency everyone else has quietly agreed to live with. The one who will hand you an honest answer instead of a comfortable one, because managing your feelings about the truth was never part of her calculation. The one who can sit alone with a problem for hours and come out the other side with something nobody handed her, because she was never waiting for permission to start. None of this makes her smarter than everyone else, exactly. It makes her differently equipped. And in a world that mostly rewards the obvious answer, differently equipped is its own kind of rare. The loneliness nobody warned her about. Before any of this makes sense, before the understanding arrives, there's a season she goes through that nobody really talks about honestly enough. It's the loneliness of being surrounded by people who don't quite reach her. Not because she's impossible to reach. Not because she doesn't want connection. God, she wants it. She wants it more than she'd ever admit out loud. But the connection she's hungry for requires a certain depth of engagement that most casual relationships simply don't offer. And when you're built to swim in 60-foot water, it gets exhausting paddling around in the shallow and pretending it's enough. She spent years at tables where the conversation never went anywhere real. At gatherings where she'd count the minutes until she could leave without it being rude. In friendships that asked her to stay near the surface and call it intimacy. And she really did try, to be the version of herself that those environments required. But every time she shrank herself down to fit, something inside her registered the wrongness of it. Not dramatically, just a low, persistent dissonance, like a note played slightly flat. Almost right. Not quite. What she didn't know then, what most Sigma women don't know until much later, is that this loneliness isn't a symptom of her being broken. It's the natural friction that occurs when a high-bandwidth mind is forced to operate in a low-bandwidth environment, day after day, year after year. She wasn't unlovable. She was just in the wrong rooms. Self-reliance is not her wound. Here's the narrative that needs to stop. The idea that a woman who is deeply self-sufficient must be that way because someone failed her. That the independence is scar tissue. That if she'd just heal enough, she'd finally need people the way she's supposed to. Her independence isn't built on pain. It's built on clarity. She knows who she is. She knows what she values. She knows what she needs to function and what kinds of environments drain her. She doesn't require external validation to feel stable in her sense of self because her sense of self isn't sourced from external validation. It comes from an internal anchor so solid that most people who meet her feel it without being able to name it. That anchor, that quality of being genuinely, non-performatively settled in herself, is frankly extraordinary. Most people spend their entire lives chasing it in relationships, in achievements, in the approval of people they respect. She just has it, quietly, without fanfare. This doesn't mean she doesn't want love or friendship or deep partnership. She wants all of it, but she wants it honest. She wants it real. She'd rather wait for something true than fill the space with something convenient. And that patience, which the world sometimes misreads as coldness or unavailability, is actually an act of profound self-respect. She holds out not because she's afraid of intimacy. She holds out because she knows what it feels like when it's actually real, and she won't accept the imitation. She feels everything, you just never know it. People who don't know her tend to assume she's emotionally flat, that the stillness on the surface means stillness all the way down. This could not be further from a truth. And the people who actually know her, truly know her, would probably laugh if they heard it. She feels things at an almost inconvenient depth. Music finds her in places she can't always explain. The right conversation will stay with her for 3 days after it ended. Loss hits her like weather, slow to arrive, enormous when it lands, long to pass. And love, when she lets it in, is not a soft thing. It is fierce and specific and deeply inconvenient, and she would do almost anything for the people who've genuinely earned their way past her walls. The difference is that she processes emotion internally before it ever becomes external. Her feelings are real and loud and consuming. They just happen in a room you're not allowed in until she decides you are. She doesn't perform grief for an audience. She doesn't perform joy either. What you see from her is always deliberate, always real, and always, if you're paying attention, telling you something important. This depth of feeling combined with the refusal to display it publicly is what people often mistake for numbness. But numbness is the absence of feeling. What she has is almost the opposite, an overwhelming presence of feeling that she's simply learned to carry with composure. What she's actually looking for. Strip everything away, the neuroscience, the archetypes, the frameworks, and what you find underneath is someone who simply wants what she's never been willing to fake. Realness. Real conversation. The kind that gets uncomfortable because it's actually going somewhere. Real friendship that can handle the version of her that doesn't perform, doesn't cushion every sharp corner, doesn't pretend to be fine when she isn't. Real love that isn't threatened by her independence. That is, in fact, drawn to it. A partner who doesn't need her to be smaller. A circle that doesn't require her to translate herself at the door. And what she offers in exchange for that. It's something most people spend their entire lives trying to find in someone. She offers the kind of loyalty that makes you feel held even when she is in the room. She offers honesty so clean it's almost shocking. Not cruelty, but truth delivered with care and without distortion. She offers her full, chosen attention, which is the most valuable thing she owns because she withholds it from almost everyone. When you have it, you feel the difference. The people who earn their way into her life don't leave easily because what she builds slowly, carefully, on a foundation of trust that she made you earn is the most solid thing most of them have ever stood on. She was never lost. Here is the thing nobody said to her when it would have mattered most, when she was 12 years old or 19 or 26, still trying to figure out why the map everyone handed her didn't match the territory she was walking. She was never lost. The map was just wrong. The qualities that made her strange, the quiet, the depth, the slow-burning trust, the refusal to perform, the inconvenient perceptiveness, the independence that nothing could shake. These aren't flaws in the architecture. They're features. They're exactly the things that make her remarkable in the ways that actually hold up over time. Because here's the truth about time. It has a way of revealing what's actually made of something real. The things that looked like confidence in other people turn out to have been performance. The social ease that seemed effortless turns out to have been exhausting to maintain. The connections that looked shiny turn out to have been shallow. And slowly, the world starts to notice the woman who never needed any of it, who built something solid in the quiet, who knew herself when everyone else was still figuring out who they wanted other people to think they were. She was never the problem. The lens was. Conclusion. Her name. Finally. There's a woman. Maybe you know her. Maybe you are her. Who has spent a significant portion of her life being handed the wrong story about herself. She was told she was too much. or not enough, or difficult, or strange, or beautiful in theory, but exhausting in practice. She was handed personality as though it were a diagnosis. She was offered connection so long as she agreed to come as someone slightly different than she actually was. And she tried, sometimes, but she always came back to herself. Because that's the thing about the Sigma female. You cannot actually outrun your own depth. You can cover it. You can apologize for it. You can perform your way around it for years. But it's always there, waiting patiently, solid as stone, clear as water, entirely itself. Neuroscience didn't create her. It just finally gave the world a language to recognize what was already there. So let's say it plainly, once, for every woman who needed to hear it and never did. You are not weird. You are not broken. You are not too much or not enough or difficult to love or impossible to understand. You were a kind of mind and soul the world didn't yet have the language for. It has it now. They called her weird. Neuroscience calls her Sigma. But the truest name, the one she always carried, even when she couldn't say it out loud, is simply herself. And there has never been anything wrong with that.